What's up guys and welcome back to On the Brick, where we are continuing this series of understanding Baggles. In the first video, we took a look at Clone Army Customs and everything that they are, and in the second video, we took a look at AV Figures and what they offer. And today, as promised, we're going to be looking at one of the major differences between the two, that being their style of printing. In other words, pad printing versus UV. Today we're going to be looking at the differences between them, what each entails, and if one is better than the other. Spoiler alert, it depends entirely on you, but the process is one that I find interesting. So two quick things of note here. First, a lot of what I'm talking about comes directly from AV Figures. They were a huge help with making several of the videos in this series, and I wanted to give them another shout out for that. And second, a lot of what we're talking about today is relevant to more than just LEGO. Both of these methods are widely used in a variety of different ways. The LEGO market for both of these styles of printing is actually relatively small. Well, at least if you exclude LEGO the company proper, because I haven't actually looked at it. But if you didn't know, any and every time that LEGO prints something, whether it's a tile or a minifigure, it is done through pad printing. So I ended up just rambling on for a little bit and took it out because most of it isn't really relevant. Point of what I'm trying to say here is that, again, both of these methods are widely used outside of LEGO, but in this video I will only be looking at it in reference to LEGO. So to start with, a lot of the custom minifig makers of whom I purchase from use UV printing. The huge exception to this rule though is Clone Army Customs, who after they stopped doing decals, switched to pad printing. This was generally considered a good move. Now most of my audience, at least from the comments that I've seen and from the messages that I've received, vastly prefer pad printing. They claim that the quality is a lot higher than UV and is generally better. So why is that? Well, to understand that, we need to look at the process. And to look at the process and understand that correctly, I need to make one thing very clear. When you hear printing, you might be thinking of the normal style that most of us are familiar with. You have a design or something on the computer, and then you just hit print and it pops out. And if there's one thing that I learned from my trip to Vegas earlier this year, it's that printing is much more complicated than that. But second, pad printing is nothing like this, even remotely. So while I'm not going to sit here and go through every single last detail of what a pad printer has, I am going to give you enough of the basics to fully understand this. So to do that, I'm going to walk you through the process of printing on a single minifigure, of which the most important element that you need is a plate. On average, this plate will cost about $5 to $15, but what's important about it is that it contains the design that you need. However, these plates can only hold one color at a time. And on a quick side note before anyone points it out, this would actually not be accurate. For this to be accurate, it would have to be either the torsos or the legs, but not both. Just go with it. So then we introduce the ink. That is what this black circle is. It sits on the top of the pad away from the design to start with, because at this moment, the actual pad of the pad printer would actually be picking up the design. I did not include it for the sake of ease so you could see the design. I'll be including it in just 1 second though. After this, the ink will slide back down, refilling the design. At this same time, the pad, which is the pink thing, will be moving over the minifigure that is about to be printed. This thing has to be aligned manually, and if you mess up, there is no fixing it. The pad is then pressed down, imprinting the single color and the design onto the minifigure before basically resetting. This process is repeated for each individual minifigure, for each individual color, and for each individual surface. And again, that's a different plate for each of those. Well, not for each minifigure, but each color is a different plate, each design is a different plate, and each surface is a different plate. So for something like this individual minifigure, that might be fine, but let's say you want to do something with a little bit more, like this bomb squad, I think, clone trooper. Well, first, let's figure out how many colors are there. So you have orange, obviously, Then you have some black that needs to go on there. Then you have some light gray, some dark gray, and if for some weird reason you did not print this on an already white minifigure, then you also need white. So that's just 5 different colors. Now that means that for the torso alone, for just the front of the torso, that's already 5 different plates. Then you have the legs, each side of the minifigure if you do that, the back, the arms, the head, maybe a helmet, and so very quickly the amount of plates used starts to add up. And keep in mind, each one of those is on average about $5 to $15. So for this minifigure, they would have to repeat that same process that I talked about a minute ago for the orange. Putting on the correct plate, having the correct ink in there, having it aligned correctly. Then you load it up, you line it up, you press it in for the orange, and then you have to do it for the black, and then you have to do it for the light gray, and then you have to do it for the dark gray. And while basic and smaller pad printers really can only do a color or 2, there are larger ones that are capable of doing more than that. But obviously that also means that the cost is then higher. And it's for this exact reason that what Clone Army Customs does is genius. Because if they have one plate that is just the basic design of a clone trooper armor, they can just keep using that again and again and again and again and again. It doesn't really wear out. I mean, eventually I'm sure you'll want to replace it like you will anything, but you can just keep using it. You don't have to buy a new plate for the next one. And it's also why his not really minimalistic designs, but also not really simpler designs, but just why his designs are pretty genius about it too, because they take advantage of these limitations, usually keeping the number of colors down while not looking bad. For instance, this P25's on his torso has a whopping 4 colors on it. That's it. In fact, I dare you to try and find a minifigure on Clone Army Customs that has more than 6 colors on it. If you find one, let me know in the comments down below. Now, again, the genius of this is that a lot of the basic design of these clones are exactly the same, allowing him to use them over and over and over again for a bunch of different minifigures, and then having individual plates for the more specialized designs of those minifigures. And because Clone Army Customs is as big as they are and has been around for as long as they have been, they're capable of doing that. For smaller businesses or custom makers, that's much more of a risk to do. You have to put a lot more money up front and might not see that return. So with that said, let me quickly summarize this process one more time, as it is for Clone Army Customs, and I'm going to take the exact message that AV Figures sent me. Here's the process. You have to design the thing to begin with, laser engrave pads, which is 1 pad per clone per surface, so for a grunt, which has 3 colors, that's 12 plates for just the torso. Each plate then needs to be aligned and manually loaded when printing on a single surface of a figure. On average, that's about 16 to 20 surfaces for a wraparound figure. The alignment of the minifigure is also pretty tricky and has to be done one piece at a time. Clone Army Customs then needs to make the custom molds that he has for his helmets and backpacks and whatnot, and then those also need to be pad printed, meaning more plates. It is a very time consuming and quite expensive process. So what about UV printing? Well, allow me to show you the video that AV Figures sent me of his UV printing process. This is not edited in any way except for removing the horrendously loud noise that it makes. It really is just this simple. You just have to design the thing, load the figure into a fixture, then you print one side, print the other side, print the left side, print the right side, print the arms, pretty much it. It is overall significantly faster and significantly cheaper, because a UV printer is more like the kind of printer that you know. It's not limited by color, the printer just prints an image onto the surface. But pad printing is extremely limited by color. You can only print 1 color per surface at a time. Some pad printers have multiple color channels and can print all colors in one pass, but they have to be stamped 1 at a time. So even if you have the more expensive pad printers that can hold multiple colors, it's still 1 color at a time, 1 minifigure at a time. So yeah, it really is that simple for UV printing and really is that complicated for pad printing. So I can understand why people say that pad printing is a lot better and prefer it. So what about me and what do I prefer? Well, I know a lot of you aren't really gonna like this, but I don't really have a preference. As long as the design of the minifigure is something that I enjoy, that's what I look for more than whatever kind of method was used to print it. I've had several people actually tell me that they aren't interested in buying AV Figures custom printed minifigures because they're made using UV prints, which is dumb. Like, I'm really sorry for saying that, but that's just a really dumb mentality to have. If you don't like the design, that's totally fine, you don't have to. But to write it off immediately just because of the method that was used to print it doesn't really make that much sense. AV Figures designs are not bad at all. In fact, I much prefer them over several other custom makers. And right now, I have a pretty good chunk of his printed minifigures, of which I've never had an issue with them. Each and every single one looks fantastic. The only difference that the method of printing makes is in the final cost of the minifigure. And if there is anything that you should take out of this entire video, it is what I just said there. The only difference that the method of printing makes is the final cost of the minifigure, which is hugely important to this whole series. Now, obviously, there's always going to be some lingering questions with this, like, if UV printing is cheaper to do, then why are AV's minifigures usually more expensive than Clone Army Customs? Well, that's because AV also has to decal a lot of the helmets, and they are a much smaller team, printing out much smaller quantities. And if pad printing is much more expensive, especially at lower quantities, then why is that what Baggles does? Well, that's what we're going to answer over the next 2 videos. But for right now, I really enjoy both Clone Army Customs and AV Figures. I like both of their designs, and I think both of their printed minifigures are perfectly fine. If I didn't know which one made which minifigure, I'm sure that I could tell some sort of difference between the two, but printing method probably wouldn't be the first thing on my mind. Okay, but let me be very clear about one thing here. If you think that pad printing is better, that's totally fine. You are not wrong for thinking that. If you think UV printing is better, that's totally fine. You're also not wrong for thinking that. Whatever your preference is totally okay, because it's your preference. For me, it's just not a deciding factor on whether or not I will get the minifigure. So with that said, as always, please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Keep in mind that I did way oversimplify all of this today. If you liked what you saw, I would appreciate it if you hit the like button, and please consider subscribing for future videos. Thank you all so much for watching, welcome to 2023, and I'll see you in the next one.